said, be brave, my son, I'll be home soon. The boy held on to hope till he got that awful news. And as they folded up the stars and stripes, 21 guns pointed towards the sky. As the shots rang out, he flinched a little each time. Then a soldier in his best dress walked up to him, and you know the rest.
Hey, welcome everybody to Spirits and Stories with Donald Dunn. I am excited to be with you. And as always, this show is brought to you by Operation Encore. They are a 501c nonprofit. They are helping veterans get into the music industry and turning them into rock stars every single day. So go to operationencore.org and give them a hand. Hit their little donate button if you can, and follow them on all their social medias. Hey, today we have got a fun guest. She has been on, I've been on her show. She's helped us out with some of the nonprofit stuff that we got going on. She's got an amazing company, and we're going to have a great conversation. So I want y'all to listen. Take some notes because you're about to talk to the media genius. Her name is Alicia Galati. She is the CEO of Galati Media. She's been listening to podcasts since 2015 and knows what goes into creating a standout podcast that captures your audience's attention even before they press play. Alicia's helped coaches and thought leaders launch and maintain over 50 podcasts. I struggle with one. And has developed a signature through systems to launching and managing podcasts, so you don't have to stress about anything following through the cracks. Let's bring on Alicia Galati. All right.
Hey.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you, Donald?
Man, I if I was doing any better, it'd be illegal.
I feel that.
Why don't you give everybody a quick background? How did you come about to getting into the podcasting industry?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So I feel like we got to start this back to when I first started listening to podcasts, and that was in 2015. And I was personally sick of the same 5 songs that they were playing on the radio. Work, take my kid to his daycare place, and I'm driving back and forth and doing all this driving, and I'm like, I'm a lifelong learner. I love to learn, so let me find something else. And at this point, this is 2015, all right, Google Play Music had both music and podcasts. So think Spotify back in the, this is maybe Spotify was just coming out. And I remember finding podcasts and being like, oh my goodness, I can learn on the go. This is so cool. Started listening, and in 2016 guested as a podcast guest for the very first time. And I was talking about parenthood and postpartum depression, which, if you think at that time, this is before Chrissy Teigen came out about postpartum depression. No one was really talking about it. And I was like, look, y'all, this is real. I have struggled with it. This is serious. Let's talk about this. And so I guested on my first show. Absolutely loved it. Loved the medium. And then in 2018, after much internal debate, because I do not like the sound of my own voice, decided to launch my very first podcast. Fast forward, I was like, man, this is terrible. The idea of producing and coming up with new content constantly kind of caught up with me at that point. Mm-hmm. And so I launched a podcast with my sister called Two Sisters and a Cult. It was more fun. We're talking about cults, which can be a little depressing sometimes, but talked through all of these cults and how it related to how we grew up, which we grew up in a cult. So we touched on all of that, and we're able to kind of therapeutically process our trauma and our childhood, which I didn't realize that podcasting would be a medium to be able to do that, but it was. Yeah. And then in 2020 decided, now this is before I got laid off, was like, I'm doing this little side hustle stuff. I've been doing digital marketing since 2016. I've been writing blogs, doing digital marketing. I think I could do some podcast production. Let me see if I could do this for other people. Fast forward to April 2020, got laid off in the first wave from the company. And I was like, man, what in the world am I going to do? And the universe was kind of like nudging me off the ledge. Hey, we talked about this. You said you were going to do this thing. And so I, got drunk after getting laid off, because as one does, was like, look, I'm just going to drink my sorrows away for the weekend. Come Monday, I got on Facebook and I said, hey, business friends that I've been procuring over the last, so many years. Does anybody want to launch a podcast? It's going to be super cheap. We're going to try this out. I'm collecting unemployment. It's fine. Let's see if I can do this. Was able to create a podcast for somebody, replicate the results that I was able to see with my own podcast. And I thought, there's something here. I like this. And now we have, at this point, launched over 25 podcasts. We manage anywhere from 10 to 15 weekly shows, depending on the time of year, because some people like to go on season breaks and stuff. But we are a small but mighty team in managing podcasts, and I love the medium. And I think it really goes back to growing up in a cult, not being able to actually use my voice and speak my truth, what I felt, what I wanted, because it was always the adult saying or the leader saying, this is the way. That's it, period. You are to be seen and not heard. And so podcasting is a way for us to kind of take that power back. And so to be able to stand behind people who are making a difference in the world, it lights me up.
Me and you both, and for the listeners that don't know about when I came on your show, me and you both have something in strong common, and that's how therapeutic podcasting has been for both of us. You with your sister and talking about your mom and your growing up, and me with combat and PTSD and some other mental health things, I'm told. So I think at the end of the day, we can already add that to the list. I mean, it's repeated over and over through the podcasting community. Me and you are not the only ones that feel that way. But I completely understand, because it does feel good giving other people a voice. With my nonprofit that I'm building, that happens as well. So I can completely relate to helping somebody tell their story. And these last few years, I've been extremely telling every veteran, you need to document your life story, whether you were a cook that deployed one time or you're a guy that didn't deploy. We don't know what history we're going to be told 40 years from now. So it's important that you document that stuff. And you're helping people do that every single day. Document their stories, their passions, the things they love. And I think that's amazing. It's not easy.
No, not even remotely. It's one thing that we promise our clients is that we listen to every word. And this is, I think, what really sets us apart from other production companies, because, you outsource to India or the Philippines or somewhere else, and they're just going to listen through for those false starts, the ums, the ers, the weird, I stumbled over my words at this point, take that out. Whereas we listen for more of, what does the listener want? What does that listener expect? Oh, you went on a side tangent about your cat. Not really relevant. Doesn't add any value. We heard it. Cool. Interesting story. But your audience doesn't really need to hear it. And so we do take a lot more creative liberty, but I'm constantly coaching clients on, your message matters and your voice matters. And even if you feel like you're just talking into the void, you're talking to my team at least. And we've had clients say on their recordings, hey, Jess, which is one of my team members, take this out. So they know that someone is there listening, and it helps you kind of get out of your head of, oh, I'm just talking into this microphone. Who in the world's going to hear it? But I think knowing that at least one person will really helps a lot. And plus, I always sit on those initial recordings with them, kind of talk them through. All right, say this next part, or let's re-say that, maybe with a little more energy, a little more excitement. You're starting to your energy starting to come down. Podcast listeners are going to look for that type of energy. And so I coach them through, and it is a bit of production, but also some mindset work of like, your message matters. It doesn't matter that there are 50 other podcasts about productivity. What you have to say is important for your audience. Let's get that shit out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do fully believe this, whether it's one person or a million people that listen to your show, every person that listens is giving you their most valuable asset, and that's their time. We all say we wish we had more time to do this, or we wish there was more time for that. Well, somebody's giving you the time, and we all know how valuable it is. So you should be talking to everybody that's listening, whether it be one or a million, and giving them a product that is worth their time.
Yeah, that can be really hard too, I think, for people because historically, and I had a guest recently come on my show where he was talking about how he launched a podcast back in like the 2012 or 2013. And he's like, I did what all guys did. It was a couple of white dudes sitting around a microphone talking about things that we had no right talking about. It was like, okay, glad somebody said it, because that is how podcasting tended to feel. Whereas
Yeah.
now I feel like it's really, the bar is so low, the entry is so low, literally $12 a month, $15 a month. Just throw something up on the internet and use your voice to make an impact. I think that it is so valuable. And you said something really important. We're giving people something to occupy their time, but they're giving us their time back. And I don't think we realize how precious that is, because when people are on places like social media, they're scrolling for dopamine hits. They're literally just there to feed the scroll, to feed the ADHD, to feed that. But when someone presses play on your podcast episode, they are intentionally saying, I want to spend the next 20 to 30, maybe minutes with you. And that is what I'm focusing my time on. You get the know, like, and trust factor so much quicker, but it also creates something that I like to call the podcast celebrity effect. And I don't know if you've had this happen to you, but I have had it happen to me where people will get on sales calls with me, or they'll book a coffee chat with me. They're like kind of geeking out in a way of like, oh my God, I can't believe it's you. This is crazy. I can't believe I'm talking to you right now. And I'm like, I'm literally just another person. Like, there's nothing crazy interesting about me except growing up in a cult. That's always interesting. But other than that, like, I'm just I put my pants on like everybody else. I get my fuzzy socks like everybody else. Like, I am not any type of celebrity, but because you're in someone's ear, not just while they're looking for a dopamine hit, right? So they've intentionally said, I'm going to spend that time with you. Also, as they're listening to you, they're probably, so I believe it's about 70% of podcast listeners do other things while they listen to podcasts. Which means they're driving to work. They're associating what you're saying, your words, with landmarks, with places that they're going, with traffic interactions that they're having. They're connecting those dots. Their brains are connecting that with things that you've said. Like, I can think back to, same idea, an audiobook that I was listening to. It was The Shining by Stephen King. I was listening to that audiobook, driving through a hurricane, trying to get home from work. I have vivid recollection of that scene from the book and me driving in that hurricane, because of the way that our brains associate what we're doing and what other things are happening at that moment, like
Right.
listening to a podcast, listening to an audiobook. And so most people are going about their everyday lives. They're folding their laundry. I used to take showers and listen to podcasts because it was the only time I could get quiet without my kids. Driving home from work, or maybe they're cooking dinner, they're going on a walk with their dog. And so they associate the things that you're saying with their everyday life. You become part of their routine. And so it creates even more of a connection with you as the host. And when you think about that, even if 10 people are doing that, imagine sitting in a room, small room, with 10 other people who are there and they're just looking at you and they are listening to every word you have to say. They're so excited about what you have to say. That is impactful. And that's what podcasting does.
Yeah. I mean, I've had something similar to that happen where everybody was sitting around just looking at me and listening. I mean, it was a police station, but at the end of the day, you know, they did want to hear what I had to say.
Yeah, it feels impactful. And if we think about the people that are listening to our podcast in that way, imagine how different we might show up.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if it was in person, you know, and you need to treat it
Mhm.
like it's that. Just because you can't see them, and while you're probably recording, they can't see you, but you still need to give it that same perception, that same production quality of the fact that they could be sitting there with you. You know, that's like a comedian on TikTok thinking, "Oh, I'll never be big one day." Well, you know, if you think that way, you will be that way. You know, every TikTok needs to be just like you were standing on that stage, making the whole crowd roar. And I think it is important. And you said another part too. I think the other part to this is people get into this because the bar is so low to get in. It doesn't cost much. Literally simple. The phone that you're already holding, and if you went on Spotify and did it through Spotify, it's literally free. Your phone you're already paying for, and Spotify. Does that mean you're going to have a production that is the best quality for everybody to listen to? No. But I think that lowness of that bar has brought in a lot of people that think this is simple, because there's a lot of people that don't understand what podcasting takes and what it really is. And I'll tell you a funny story. So during season one, when me and my co-host started this, we literally heard somebody in the hallway say, "Well, those two won't be here much longer." This was at work. And we're like, "Say what?" And they go, "Yeah, once that money starts rolling in from that podcast they just started, they're going to leave. Just like all these other famous people." And I was like, "There's money coming? Where's it coming from? I ain't seen any." You know? But it's just that misconception because they hear you over a medium that is not the norm, and it puts you at a different level, just like you were saying.
Yeah, I don't think people realize that even though the bar is set so low, it takes effort, right? It takes,
Yes.
and I'm sure you
A lot.
know this, it takes so much effort to not only create something that you're proud of, right? And I don't mean over analyzing it and over editing it. Literally, if you throw up everything with your ums, your ers, and your false starts and all that, you still have to promote it and talk about it with people, right?
Yeah.
Like you still have to tell people, I have a podcast, get up on social media. Okay, what does that platform want from me? How can I, work the algorithm to get my stuff in front of other people? Because with the slew of podcasts out there, I think I was looking at some stats recently for podcasting, and the number of active podcasts that there are today is actually no different than in 2020, which
Wow.
is really strange if you think about it. Like everybody was like, I'm going to start a podcast, pandemic life. I'm going to get in my closet. I'm going to do this thing. Everybody who thought that, there hasn't been a change in the number of people continuing to podcasts. So that means podcasts have fallen away, new podcasts have arisen, and there's no change in that number. And so even though the bar is set so low, I don't think people realize how much work and how much effort goes into it. And if you're going to launch a podcast, I think that's really important to decide, is this something that I want to do long term? Or does this need to be a limited series? Or do I need to just kind of go with the flow, right? It really depends on your personality. How much planning do I need to put into this? Do I need to outsource certain things? You really have to be strategic. And yes, it might work for some people to just put the microphone up in front of their face and speak out into the ether and things happen, but that doesn't happen for the majority of people.
Right.
And so it's really important that you're intentional, that you know, okay, starting a podcast or having a podcast right now is the same as having a YouTube channel. So if you were to start a YouTube channel tomorrow, what kind of results would you expect? Probably not thousands of followers right away. Probably not $1 million deal like Joe Rogan.
Yep.
You're going to expect practical results, right? So think the same way with a podcast.
Yeah. You know, I think the other thing too is you have to ask yourself, what is your goal? Just like you were saying, is this going to be, do I want this to be a career? Is this just me having fun? Because there's different standards, you know, the Spotify phone could very well be something that's just for fun. You don't have to invest a lot to have fun. But your competition to do it for a living isn't those guys. You know, you're seeing bigger cookies coming into the podcasting industry now, and that's not because this is going away. You know, there is big companies out there paying people to put together podcasts, and that comes with a production team, a camera guy, a sound guy. I mean, you look, Joe Rogan even talks about it. He, you know, that is a 3-man person. There's a 3-man crew that runs his podcasts. You know, I even heard him say one time that if it's a topic that he's not very comfortable with or really into, he has a guy that he pays to research it, to bring him the keynotes and the points to talk about it on his show. That's not something the average guy is going to be able to start out with and say, hey, I need to pay for this guy to come over and film me and this guy to tune my sound and a light guy to make sure the lights are all great. And that just is not out there. Not realistically.
Yeah. No, not at all. And you really have to get clear on, like you said, what your goals are, right? If your goal is to have fun, then keep having fun. It is a great medium for getting to know new people, connecting with others, sharing your story, shooting the shit. Like, it's a great space for that because you have this more intimate setting that then gets distributed, right? But right now, podcasting is on par with TV views. So the number of people that are actively listening to podcasts, the same number of people that are actively watching TV. So if you think about that, okay, it looks like podcasting is going in a good direction. That's good. But how can I get better results, right? So if your goal is to monetize, don't just think linearly. Maybe that's a word. I don't know. I think that's a word. Like in one direction toward ads only. If you're able to kind of step back and say, okay, I'm going to have conversations with these types of people to get them into my orbit, to get them into, my community or my connections that could then either they could lead to clients or they know someone who could lead to clients. And I'm having a genuine conversation that feels good, that feels exciting, and then can move forward with keeping in contact with them, keeping in connection with them. So it's not just about the ads or even turning your listeners into leads, right? Which is like my whole thing. But there's so many other ways that I don't think that we even care to try because everyone talks ads. But what people don't realize is that 90% of podcasts are not getting over 1,000 downloads per episode. You need to have over 1,000 downloads per episode for it to even be worth it. And right now, the pay is about $25 to $32 per 1,000 downloads. So if your podcast is getting 1,000 downloads within the first 90 days, that's $32. It's not a lot of money for one episode of work. And so you have to think strategically if you're looking to monetize your podcast, right? You have to think outside of the box of like, okay, ads might not work, but maybe I have created really great connections with people and I'm selling my consulting services or I'm selling my security services, whatever it is that you're selling, you can make those connections via your podcast. That can lead to better income and monetizing your podcast that way. But even beyond that, how can you factor in with those sponsors if you do go that ad route? How can you factor in your email list, your followers, your subscribers, the people even beyond the listeners to charge a flat rate that feels both good for you and for the other person, the company that you're interacting with. So you have to really think outside of the box, especially since you're probably going to land in the group of people that are getting less than 1,000 downloads per episode, which is normal, right? I don't think that people realize it's perfectly okay to get those results. You're still talking to 300 people. You're still talking to 500 people. Imagine sitting in a room and there's 500 people there sitting there waiting to hear what you have to say. That is impactful. That is not like anything that we even see on, TikTok or Instagram, because it's just the dopamine hits and the likes and the dancing and the cats. like it's all of that. And it's mediocre. It's surface level stuff, especially if you have the rise of AI and AI content, right? There's all these people and the voices that are kind of happening in the social space. But when you take it back to a more intimate setting of I'm talking into this microphone, you're on the other end listening to me. There's something so powerful in that you can very easily sell to those types of people who know you, who like you, who trust you, but it takes time, right? So I would say if you're going to start a podcast and you're trying to monetize it, honestly, don't expect any type of monetization in that first year, because that is you getting clear on your message, getting clear on your audience, and also getting clear on how you need to approach the topic to be able to sell either to your guest or your audience or to ads.
Yeah. No, you are absolutely right. And I think with that being said too, mistakes as you setting things up can restart that year. If you, for example, for me, we started out with the name Two Drunk Dudes in a Gun Room. We knew going into it that you either loved us or hate us. There was no middle, right? And when you go into knowing that, you accepted the fact that you have cut your listeners base down. Now you are not talking to all of the podcasting community. You're talking to a very small niche of them. And so rebranding the show was a good thing for me, but that starts that year over again. Now people have to get to know the new show. It's not the same show it was under that name. And it makes it tough, because when you start this, it's the questions you don't know that get you later.
Yeah, there's so much that goes into it, right? And even with a rebrand, we've had clients go through rebrands, and this is why I typically tell people like try to tie your rebrand in. So if you're a podcaster and you're like, this is no longer serving me, try to tie it in with a milestone episode, usually around a 25 marker, right? So 25 episodes, 50, 75, 100, and ongoing. So we'll have our clients usually around the 100 episode mark. Okay, let's take a look at your graphic. Does that still align? take a look at your name. Do you have a new trademark? Do we need to put that information in there? So we're looking at all of these different things, even to the point of, is your description still aligned with what the show is about? And I think that so often we create something and kind of hold ourselves hostage to it in a way that does us a disservice, where it's like, I'm going to hold on to, as I was talking to someone on my podcast this morning, we were recording an episode for a couple of months from now. And she was saying that she was holding on to an email subscriber, an email platform for almost a year, even though every time she tried to get in front of it, she was literally having a visceral reaction of, I hate this. And so you got to follow, is this actually serving you anymore? Do you need to shift it? And when you're showing up regularly for a podcast and you're not getting the results that maybe you anticipated or you liked or you wanted, it's really important that you take a step back and you say, did I do everything that I possibly could to promote this, share this, reach that goal? If you can honestly say yes, then does the content still serve you? Does it still align with you? Or do you need to shift? And I think that it takes a lot of self-awareness to say, I think I need to shift, because it feels like starting over, and you go, especially starting over, you feel like you go through this stage of, am I doing the right thing? Yes, I'm definitely doing the right thing. But are you sure you're doing the right thing? No, I'm not sure anymore. It kind of feels like this battle within yourself of trying to figure out if you're doing the right thing. But I think that if you can just take a second and breathe and say, does this align with the direction that I as a person am going in? If you can say yes, then you're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, I completely agree. And not to be afraid to try things, right? Not everything is going to work. But if everything did, you wouldn't learn anything from it. So the best knowledge is the things that didn't work. And you, when you find those things that do work, well, then you stick with that, but you keep trying other things as well that you can put with what is working. And I've learned that part of it. But there's another topic that I want to kind of dig into, because I know every podcaster out there has the same problem. And that is, how do you promote? You know, because with social media, you're literally having to double promote, right? So not only do I want to promote my show, but I have to promote me to get you to follow me, so that when I post about the show, you see it. And so that's where the fact where people are starting to pay for ads, and let me reach people that aren't friends with me, but they don't know how to make them effective, and that money is just getting thrown, and you're not getting the results from that. I know a lot of people that don't even track the results of their, they can't tell you what ads did good and which ones did bad. They're just hitting promote, promote, promote. And it's tough. What is the best way to promote a show?
Yeah, this is really hard. I am seeing a decline in social engagement across the board.
Yes.
So, like I said, we're managing 10 to 15 shows per week, including 2 of my own. And there is a huge decrease in engagement. And we are promoting on every single platform between all of our clients and between ourselves. So I would say what works is whichever works for the platform. And right now, that is video marketing, talking head, grabbing attention, trying to hold it for 10 seconds. Honestly, that is what everybody's fighting for. But there are a few other things that you can do to promote your show. Number one, the fastest and quickest way to grow your podcast is by being a guest on other podcasts. Now, this is difficult because for every one podcast host, there are 25 people vying for a spot on that show. Now, a lot of those pitches are absolute trash. You get them, I get them. They are literally a huge red flag of pick me, I'm awesome, how dare you not like me and have me on your show. That's not how you do it. Do it strategically, be human about it. Beyond that, so being a guest on other people's podcasts is number one. Second is SEO. Now, I know people are saying SEO is dead. It's not. I promise. It is not dead. I recently had a friend of mine. She's not a client. I've done strategy sessions with her before, but she had an episode about productivity. And she had someone find her by searching in their podcast app. This is not Google, searching within the podcast app for an episode podcast about productivity. She had one singular episode that touched on productivity. It was not even her podcast theme. Her podcast theme was about copywriting and business. And so this one episode that had that productivity search term that this person looked for, they listened to that episode, immediately said, I like her. I want to book a strategy session with her. Paid her hundreds of dollars to book a strategy session, all from that search term. I have over 150 episodes. I'm personally going back and optimizing every single podcast episode that I have for SEO. Even though I did it the first time around, SEO is changing and it's shifting. And so it's important that we're going back and we're addressing, okay, what was that content that I had? How can I make the most of it? And I think so often as podcasters and even just people who create content, this could go for authors, this could go for, music creators. You create something, you put it out there, and you're like, everybody already knows about it, on to the next. And I think that it really, I know this takes work and it takes effort and it's difficult, but if we were to take a step back and say, how can I, yes, promote my new thing, but how can I promote that old stuff too? I'm sure that there are conversations that you've had on your podcast that are still relevant today for people, that are still impactful, that can make a difference in someone's life. So maybe you use a hashtag Throwback Thursday and you throw that episode up there and you talk about a past episode. What I do is I've made it automated. So I have every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evening, my Facebook and my LinkedIn business pages automatically get fed content about past episodes. So it looks like I'm constantly posting about past episodes when really it's just, here's the pile of content I want you to pull from, an evergreen bucket, right? And then it pulls the social media scheduler, pulls an episode from that. And every week, 3 episodes get pushed up there. And then every time a new episode comes out, I push that back into the bucket and I say, make sure you add these into circulation. And so what that does is it brings not just awareness to past episodes, but it reignites that connection with your guests, which is really important because it kind of reminds me too of like, I wonder what that person is doing. Hey, I reshared about your episode recently. What are you doing? What are you up to? It allows us to reconnect and be human and potentially keep that connection open to re-promote our podcast or reshare it, or maybe they want to share it again. And so these are like out of the box ways that we can really be strategic, but you got to be doing several of these, which I know it sucks because it's hard by yourself, but doing several of these to promote our podcast. So being a guest on other people's show, making the most of the social platforms that we're already on, pretty much feeding the algorithm what it wants, right? And I know that sucks, but feeding the algorithm what it wants, and then not forgetting about that past content because we can make so much effort with those.
Yeah. I like that idea. I really do. And that's really cool. Look, I am a fan of things like AI and machine learning and stuff like that. I believe there's a place for it. And I don't believe that these tools are going to necessarily take over the world, like the conspiracies out there think, Will it change some things? Sure. But so did the internet. So did electricity.
Yeah.
So it'll be different, but it'll still be the same. It'll just look different. And so I do use AI. I use it a lot for tool wise, especially with the book that I just released. I mean, look, if I was a editor, I would be charging people to edit their books. I'm not. The English and the grammar, you'd have to write hillbilly for me to be able to edit it. So I use AI, you know. Um, I use other writing tools as well. The one thing I don't use it for is to create the content for me. Maybe there's a better word. Maybe I didn't need a comma. Those types of things, absolutely. But what comes out is my voice and what I wanted to say and how I wanted it said. The tone, the the voice behind it, whether it's excitement, drama, that's all dictated by me. And so I think there's a place for it. And I love what you're saying about, because that place is anything that makes it faster for you. And if you get into podcasting, you're going to find out you have to find ways to make it faster. You know, um, if I do 2 shows a week and it releases every Tuesday, every Wednesday, like clockwork. Haven't missed a show in years. But editing 2 shows and sending out all the reels without AI, I'd never be able to do it. It would be impossible. And
Yeah.
it's not.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've been having a lot of discussions around AI and podcasting. Actually, literally just finished creating a mini course that's going through my team to edit right now about using AI as a podcaster. And one of the first lessons within it is using AI ethically.
Yeah.
So obviously, we want to create content that is our own, especially in the face of people very blatantly claiming that they are using AI to write entire books. That
Yeah.
is wild, and also very brazen of them to say and charge people money for. That
Yeah.
doesn't feel good for a lot of us, right? And you've got,
No.
I mean, I have friends where they're like, my 2 journalism degrees are shaking in their boots because this feels really scary. But I will say, the whole course that I have is about this idea. What you're feeding the algorithm, what you're feeding AI is your own content. You can ask it for help with the brainstorming, but when you sit down to record, it is your voice. It is your stories. That is what is going to connect people with you even more than anything else that's written by AI. It's that person human touch of
Mhm.
experience. And so then you take that transcript and you feed it to Gemini, ChatGPT, etc. Right? There's tons of
Yep.
tools out there, even tools specifically for podcasters. And then you say, first and foremost, this is really important. Do a tone check of this, because I have actually tried to train the algorithm or the AI to use my tone and
Yep.
find my tone. And I provided it with 4 different episodes that I have personally spoken, and it was like, yeah, your tone changes every time. I was like, oh, okay. So it depends on how I'm feeling that day or how I'm feeling about the topic or what the topic is. Either I'm going to be more personable or I'm going to be more authoritative and educational. And so it really just depends. So, first and foremost, do a tone check of this and make sure you're using this tone throughout all of the additional content. That way it feels like you. And so
Yeah.
I'll tell it to do that first. It does the tone check. I'll say, all right, now let's go ahead and come up with some SEO friendly titles. Give me 5 to 10 of those, because most likely half of them are going to be trash. I'm not going to
Yep.
like them. There's going to be too many colons in there, right?
Yep.
I'm not going to enjoy that. So, how can I rephrase it to be aligned with my own voice and what I would want for my title? Say, okay, this is the title I'm going to pick, and I'll let it know. Now let's go ahead and come up with some show notes for this episode. Write an overview that touches on the pain point that's discussed during this transcript. Give takeaways and then give what the win is for them. So that way they can see the transformation in that first paragraph, then give some takeaways in bullet points. Finally, give a takeaway. What is an action item that the audience can take from that episode? And so it's not even that you're feeding the algorithm, okay, this is what I want you to do for people who are going to read the show notes. You're thinking in terms of, and a friend of mine used this phrase this morning in a meeting we had, and I loved it. You're using AI to feed the algorithm, right? And so it's you're still using your own voice, you're still using your own tone, you're rewriting it where you need to because it's never going to be perfect. Misspells my name constantly. And so you're giving it all this information, making the most of it, but you're literally just working to, how can I make sure that if someone is searching for this type of content, that they're going to get fed via the algorithm this type of content? Because the majority of your listeners are actually not going to look at the show notes. It's literally just for feeding the algorithm. So using it to create this content is not unethical if you're initially feeding it your own content, right? Your own voice, what you've said, what you've done. And then you go back in and you say, that didn't really sound like me, or it used too many emojis. That doesn't really feel like me or how I would show up. Let me tweak this very quickly. But it's great for ideation. It's great for, I kind of want to do this thing. What are some ways that I could do this better? Am I missing anything? That's what I like to use AI for. And I think that it is such a great tool. And I've been, as a mom, trying to teach my own kids about checking what people say on the internet and double checking. And sometimes you got to Google things, and here's how to find reputable sites. Okay, this person said that an octopus has X amount of hearts. I always forget the number. I bet my 10-year-old would correct me. But this person on Instagram said that the octopus has so many hearts. Let's double check. Okay, Nat Geographic said that it does have this many hearts. We trust that source. They double check their information. But we're not just going to say some Joe Smo said it, right? So be strategic about it, but let it work for you, especially if it's to feed the algorithm, right? Because the algorithm, it's not made for us to understand it it's kind of like banks, right? It's not made, it's a system that's not really made for us to get it. We kind of just have to figure out how to work it and then make the most of it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We're not the customer. So we're not supposed to understand it. We are the product. And that people forget
exactly.
But you touched on a topic that I think a lot of other podcasters don't understand and don't use. What do you think? What is the purpose of the show notes? How do they benefit you by using them?
Yeah. So honestly, it is good for search engine optimization. So if people are Googling or searching for something, then they're able to find it. Beyond that, it's really great to be able to help you promote the show later. So think of it as I'm doing upfront work to give myself these bullet points, these takeaways, an action item, a general overview. I can then literally copy and paste most of that into a post on LinkedIn saying, here's the podcast episode that we talked about. Here are the key takeaways. Drop something in the comments if you agree or do you disagree with this, right? So you can finagle it however you want, but I don't have to go back and re-listen to that episode to know what in the world it was about. It also allows for the very few people that do look at the show notes, because for most podcast players, once you're done with an episode, it will actually move on to the next episode or the next podcast that's on your playlist. So most of the time, it's just going to keep playing things. And so you might not always capture the people who are going to look for the show notes. But for the very few who do look at the show notes, that's going to be a place where you're going to make sure you put those links, any links mentioned, to connect with not just the guest, but also you as the host. But this is why it's so important that we're saying those things. I was recently talking to a friend. She was asking if there was anything in her podcast production wise that needed tweaking. And I was like, well, how much information do you want? Like, I literally do this for a job. I don't want to overwhelm you. I don't want to do like a full podcast audit. She was like, as much as you want to give me. I was like, okay, I'll give you a few tips. And so I listened. The production was great. That wasn't even the concern. The concern was her titles. So if I was someone new looking at her podcast, looking at the titles, I have no idea what those episodes are about. There's no clear direction of, is this an episode that I would enjoy or not? Also, she didn't have the host's name, or sorry, that's not right, the guest's name in the podcast episode title. And so if someone is searching, especially for high profile guests, if they're searching for that high profile guest, you want your episode to show up. So that helps, that titling. But then also, she, at the end of her episodes, she says, all right, thanks so much for joining me for this episode. And then it cuts to music. And I was like, well, what am I supposed to do now? I'm listening to your podcast. Where can I connect with you? Where can I get to? Where should I leave a rating and review? You're not giving them any action item to take. Tell them where to go. And so that is a place where you typically would tell someone, go follow me on Instagram. That's my favorite place to hang out, or go check me out on LinkedIn, wherever your place is. Make sure that you follow. That way, and a lot of people don't even know this, follow the podcast so you get notified, or check the little bell so you get notified every time a new episode drops. Most people are just going to listen and move on. But if they're not following, if they haven't clicked the bell for notifications, they're not going to be able to know when that next episode comes live. Or you could say, make sure you join me next Tuesday when an episode drops, right? It's letting them know how they can plan around when that next episode is. But if they're looking at the show notes, that also allows them to see, all right, where can I connect with them further? Most people are not going to look through the overview, the bullet points, or the takeaways. They're looking for those links, especially if you're mentioning a product that you like, or they're like, oh, yes, I want that product. What is it? That is a way. But really, you're using those show notes to feed the algorithm, the SEO gods, but also to help you remember, okay, that's what we talked about 3 months ago, right? Because a lot of us are trying to plan ahead for our podcast episodes. I mean, episode I recorded this morning is literally for over a month away. So it's important that I know what the episode is about, so I'm able to use those show notes or those takeaways, and I can send them to my guest and say, here's what we talked about, because there's no way I'm going to remember. Here's what the algorithm said we talked about.
So do you attach them like at the bottom of your description? Is that what you do? You just paste them into the bottom of your description? Okay.
So you've got your overall podcast description. And for that, I do recommend having somewhere, even if it's a www dot written out, you can't hyperlink it in the description, but having that written out, if someone is just on their computer and they're looking at your podcast, maybe your Apple page, they're like, yeah, I want to know more about that. Where can I go? Then you've got that link written out for them. That's going to be your overall podcast description. But the episode show notes, you're going to want to make sure you have an overview, those takeaways, some type of action item, even if that action item is literally just to follow you, subscribe to your stuff, leave a rating and review, and then where those links are. And there you can hyperlink, which is pretty great. I know Apple for a while was being a jerk and didn't want to let hyperlinks in, but now they have, which is good. And yeah, they're always being finicky and trying new stuff, but then making it difficult. So yeah, but with YouTube now trying to have a vested interest, specifically YouTube Music, trying to have a vested interest in podcasting, those SEO show notes are going to be really important. And thinking about that as like, I'm feeding the SEO gods. That's what this is for. But also it's to help me later remember what this episode's about.
Yeah, and that's something too, well, let me back up. So one of the things I do, right? Like I said, every Tuesday, Wednesday, an episode drops. I spend the rest of that week either. So Mondays, it goes out promoting the last show, one of the shows from last week, whatever, right? On Tuesday, I have a blog post with the episode embedded in it that talks about that episode that comes out usually in the evening time. So the episode drops at midnight, usually 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. That blog post will release, and it's got all my SEO type stuff. So I use that as like the place where if somebody searches for me, it goes to my website, not so much Buzzsprout or Spotify, whatever it is that you're using. It takes them to my website that's got everything that I want them to see, right? And so I make sure that I do that with each episode. And then at the end of the week, usually Thursday or Friday, I will do a recap blog post about the two that just released. And I'll throw those back out there. And they go to every, once the blog is released, it's automatically sent to every social media platform as well. And I think it's important because a lot of times you don't know what people are doing on Tuesday, Wednesday. Maybe they were on vacation, and when they come back, they're now back in tune with their phone and everything else, and they say, "Oh, I missed that episode," and they catch it on Thursday or Friday. And then I don't do much on the weekends because that's the time that I'm preparing for the next week. But I think it's important to be in as many places as possible. And like you were talking about with links, web crawlers, that's what they look for. They look for things that are linked internally as well as linked outside. Those types of things, they're going to pull that stuff because it's more interesting and it has more options for a broader audience. And that's going to help you rise a little bit higher in that search engine, whichever one it is, by having those little things. And SEO is complicated. It really is. Because like you said, there's no exact science. It does change. What words people are searching for picks, and sometimes it's weird words. Like maybe in the description, I'm going to say, listen to this show. Well, if you go and you look at hashtags, the word listen is at like 45 million, Does it have anything to do with my show? No, not really. But I want you to listen. So, adding that little stuff may make a difference, Now I don't recommend putting a hashtag that has absolutely, if I got a thing about cars, an episode about cars, and the word hot dog is up there, I wouldn't recommend doing stuff like that because you're just going to make that listener mad, for going to a show about cars when he wanted to learn how to cook a hot dog. I'm hungry, damn it.
Yes, you have to be clear. It's very important.
Yeah. If you seem so, the key to podcasting is authenticity. And the moment that you seem deceptive is the moment that you're going to start losing listeners. That trust it takes a lot longer to build that trust than it does to lose it.
Yeah, I think what the hard part is that so many times we push ourselves, especially with a weekly show, a bi-weekly show, right? We're showing up so consistently.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, I think, where batching is so important because, like, recently, we were supposed to record and I was sick. Thankfully, I had batch recorded episodes for over a month where I could be sick, where I didn't have to show up less than my normal excitement about podcasting. And also, you can hear it, right? If you're just listening to the sound of my voice, you can hear when I talk about podcasting, I get excited. I'm not sitting here droning on about the numbers that are boring. Like, your audience can hear that. They can, as my kid would say, suss it out real quick. Like, they know. And so it's so important that with mediums where you do have people's undivided attention, that you're able to keep that, even if it's just by you being you. that's how you do it, right? By being you, by sharing those human experiences, sharing those stories, and showing how it is that you, like, if you're a business owner, how you take your clients through their journey. Or if you're just telling a story about ghost hunting, be excited about ghost hunting, right? And how much excitement that brings you. And think
Yeah.
about the person that you're talking to, instead of just saying, I'm talking to this microphone, you're talking to someone. And
Yeah.
I had a recent podcast guest where she literally puts a picture of her grandmother right behind her camera. And she says, that's who I'm talking to when I'm sharing my stories, when I'm talking about my thing. So if you feel like you just want to put up a person, right? You could
Yeah.
literally just put up Homer Simpson. I don't even care. Put someone up there that is going to be like, this is the person that I'm talking to. What is it that they need to hear today from me? Even if it's a funny story, even if it's me, sharing something that's maybe less serious than business or life or health,
Mhm.
but is still something that is exciting to them, that's going to allow you to show up so much better, and it's going to keep that excitement going,
Yeah.
right? It's so hard to podcast, but it's so worth it, I think.
I absolutely agree. Well, Elise, I'm gonna bring you forward. I'm gonna give you the opportunity to tell the world where they can find you and get some of your help. I know I've had your website down here, but all podcasters have a whole bunch of places that can be found. So I'm gonna give you that opportunity. Go and tell the world about where it is that they can find you.
Yes, thank you so much, Donald. This has been so good. If you are someone who's interested in podcasts and you're thinking, I want to know more about podcasting and if it's right for me, or maybe you're a podcaster and you're struggling, you can go to listenerstoleads.com. That is my podcast where I talk to other podcasters about their journey and really touching on there's no one right way to do podcasting. We can do it however fits right for us. And my guests are there to show you that. Sometimes I come in with solo episodes, but I also have another podcast, Successful Podcasting Unlocked. You can go to successfulpodcasting.com or successfulpodcastingunlocked.com. And both of those will take you to the same place. And that is a podcast 10 minutes or less where I'm answering podcasting questions. And so far, this one launched back in January. So far, everyone who's listened has said, oh my goodness, that was so valuable. I can't wait to take action on that, specifically around how to make your podcast better or be strategic with it. So, those are the places you can find me. Obviously, you can find me on Instagram. That is my very favorite place to hang out. You'll sometimes see me in stories, but I really love showing up on my podcast more than anything. So that is definitely where you can hang out with me. All of that is at listenersleads.com or successfulpodcastingunlocked.com.
Oh, glitchy internet. Well, I appreciate that, and I can vouch. I have learned a few things as well just from talking to you, things I didn't even think about. I absolutely love that the way you were using to pull back old episodes. So I am definitely going to put that in my tool bag because I think that is
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So, well, I appreciate you coming on. I'm gonna put you in the green room, throw my exit video out, and I'll be with you in just a few seconds. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, man. Everybody, if you are into podcasting, I don't even have to tell you how valuable this episode was. There was a lot of good information. It is obvious how intelligent she is when it comes to podcasting. So if you are looking for somebody out there to help you manage, get some tips, you want to take it to the next level, she is the person to see. You can make sure you check her link down there at the bottom. I will have it in all the show notes and all the descriptions for you to find her. So you will not have to look very hard, but I strongly recommend it. I appreciate all of y'all for following. Like I said, you can find me at spirits and stories podcast.com. We're all over social media, anywhere, Gunroom Radio. If you want to listen to some music, you can find us there too. So we are all over the place. I appreciate everybody for listening. And remember, don't let the day kick your ass. Kick the day's ass.